Hey everybody, in this week's video, I want to show a feature that I built primarily for debugging and talk a little bit about the philosophy behind that. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, what is it? That's right, the Cortex Users Group. Every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, I host the Cortex Users Group. Basically, what that is it's time that I have set aside for anyone to join a Zoom call and ask any questions about Cortex. The idea is that you have access to not only me, but also other people who are using Cortex or thinking about using Cortex, have tried it out on their own databases, um, and build, kind of the community knowledge base aspect. This is definitely my attempt to mirror what was in the Cherwell users groups that each region had, while Cherwell was, kind of in its prime. And there are a couple users groups that are still having meetings. So if you want to check out a Cherwell users group, definitely check out those. Again, there are some that are still having meetings, talking about a lot of good stuff. Everybody's basically in the same boat, so a lot of the same decisions are happening. One of the topics that I've seen at quite a few has been, hey, what are you moving to? What platforms are you evaluating? Lots of great discussion. I've learned about a lot of ITSM tools that I didn't know existed, that are actually seemingly really good fits for a lot of companies that use Cherwell in the past. So worth going to those, worth talking about them. If you have questions and want my take on it, you're more than welcome to send me an email. My contact information is down in the description below. Um, but that being said, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, Cortex users group, link in the description below, and let's talk about this debugging feature. So, a little bit of philosophy, um, and just a little bit. I could go on talking about this for hours probably, but I'll keep it to a couple minutes. Um, as software companies grow, obviously there's more people involved, and generally different departments spring up. So I'm going to select specific departments, in this case, software engineering or product, if you want to call it that, professional services, and support. The more people are involved in all of those functions, and the more, uh, the larger those departments become, uh, the less they end up talking to each other relative to the amount of time they spend talking to within themselves. Um, and this ends up, uh, if it's not managed properly, if it's not um, cultivated, um, shepherded properly, can lead to kind of rifts between these departments. It's not intentional. It's not, there's no blame game going on here. It's just kind of the natural way of people. We tend to talk within the groups that we see a lot of every day, and we talk less to the people that we don't see a lot of every day. It just kind of happens that way. So if you don't have good pathways in communication between those groups, and provide support to those other groups, it can really affect, especially the support experience and the professional services experience. And that's kind of what motivates this feature that I'm about to show. So, as I've been implementing Cortex in various databases, obviously I've run into situations where certain configurations just aren't supported by Cortex yet. Basically, it's a piece of configuration that wasn't immediately obvious from the databases that I've seen so far. So it wasn't something that I built into Cortex because I didn't know it was a thing. Um, and then I come across a database where it is a thing. Cortex has issues rendering a form, or is missing a field on a grid, or isn't showing the result of an expression correctly, or something like that. And of course, I go in and fix it. And 9 times out of 10, I'm able to fix it just based on a structure and lookup czar, or in a lot of cases, it's actually just a structure only czar, which is great because that is all of the configuration. But it does mean that when I'm testing the functionality, I have to kind of inject my own dummy data into the database, and that's not exactly ideal. And uh, there are the occasional edge cases where I actually really need specific data. I need to know what the data looks like in your database in order to truly replicate the behavior that you're seeing. This usually comes across when uh, loading relationships or loading specifics forms. It's typically an ID of one form or another that's in the record that when I'm injecting dummy data, I don't know what those IDs are supposed to be, or what might uh, trigger just the right expression in just the right way to trigger the behavior. So it ends up being a lot easier if I can just get the record from your system that uh, you are actually seeing the behavior on. So I built a feature that will hopefully help with that. So let me share my screen. So I'm just going to browse to any incident. It really doesn't matter. And this is actually business object agnostic, record agnostic. It doesn't even matter what the form looks like. We have this new button here, current object values. This is basically almost a replication of inside the system analyzer, I think it's actually called current object values. There's a little button. It looks like a little tree um, in the system analyzer, and it shows the values for the current object. So in this case, I opened up this incident. It's incident ID 100433, and these are all of the values for all of the fields. So for instance, if there's an issue going on with contact source, it's not showing up correctly, well, there's the ID that I need to look at in order to figure out what's going on. Probably a better example is something like the specifics form ID, um, which I think the way this particular database works, it's driven by the uh, service category and subcategory. But even then, I can look at service category, subcategory. I have the IDs right here. Oh, here we go. Specifics type rec ID. So there is a specifics type right there. So with that, I can go figure out what's going on uh, in the rest of the database. In this case, I know that that should correspond to a specific ID, a specifics ID, uh, an ID for a specific business object type. And if it doesn't, then I know something's going on. And if that corresponds to a specific specifics, not to get extra confusing on you, but in this case, specifics is a group. It's a group object, right? So if there's an issue with that specific specifics form, I can use this ID to figure out exactly which specifics form is having the issue and not have to guess and go through each individual specifics forms. Because some of you have tons of specifics forms. I was going to say hundreds. I don't think it's quite hundreds, but I think I've seen at least close to 100. It's definitely dozens. Um, and that's a lot to go through just to guess at which one is having the issue. So I think this will help immensely help you be able to provide information to me when something does go wrong. Um, and it'll help me be able to figure out exactly what the root cause is. Now, this table by itself is not specifically useful. It might be useful if, say, it is just specifics related, and I just need this ID. But there's an export CSV button, and the export CSV button doesn't export a table that looks like this. It actually exports a CSV of one row, and all of these fields are columns. Uh, so that basically I can take that record and just drop it right into my database. Um, Once I have your uh, structure and lookups are restored, I can drop this record into, in this case, the incident table, and be able to run it in my dev environment and test. Uh, Exporting as a CSV also gives you the opportunity to sanitize the data or redact any data. So for instance, let's say, uh, this description or this description HTML has something sensitive in it or potentially sensitive, or you don't want to, you just want to avoid any potential gray areas with information security policies and that sort of thing, and we're not having an issue with the description field. You could just empty that out, empty this out. Anything that's of a potentially sensitive nature, you can just remove it from the CSV, leaving in things like, close by. That's probably not very sensitive. Close by rec ID. That's not going to be in my database anyway, so that's not a big deal. And just essentially just leave the information that is going to be relevant. So this export CSV button, just like all of the other export CSV buttons in the system, downloads the CSV to your system. You can make changes to that, edit it, redact things as necessary, and then I can still go in and drop that into my database. So that's the current object values button. This is the first of a couple things that I have planned. They're not super high priority, so they might make it into Cortex 1.7. Obviously, this is already in. This is actually on the demo site, so you can check it out for yourself. This will go into Cortex 1.7. Some of the other things I have planned may or may not. It depends on uh, how urgently I need them, realistically, because these aren't specifically valuable for you in your day-to-day usage of Cortex. But if you run into an issue, then they become valuable both to you and to me. So as I get to them, I'll add them in. As they become more and more relevant, I will continue to add them in. For instance, one uh, possible one that I might add, this one might actually bump up into 1.7, is a way to export a ZAR, um, even after you no longer have access to Cherwell. So let's say your license has expired, you haven't renewed Cherwell, and uh, you do run into an issue with Cortex. So a particular form isn't rendering correctly that you hadn't noticed before, or you weren't using that form before. Uh, well, I still want to know what's going on in that particular configuration. So without being able to log into Cherwell, you still need a way to export a ZAR. So I'll probably be adding a ZAR export of one form or another. It might not be exactly the same as what Cherwell has. Um, I'll figure out exactly what I need from something like that. But that'll be kind of in one of the administrative functions. Um, so that's where we're going. That's some of the things that'll come in 1.7. We also have some truly you know useful to you, useful to day-to-day operations features coming in 1.7 that I'll be demoing, um, possibly one later this week, but certainly in upcoming weeks. And if you have any questions, if you want to see any particular features, if you have any particular needs that you want to see Cortex solving, let us know. There's a link down below in the description. I think it's a service called Canny, to submit ideas, to submit feature requests. And of course, you can always send me an email and or schedule time with me, book time on my calendar to talk about features you want to see, how you want to build, or how you want to implement Cortex in your particular company or organization. And we can certainly get that going. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Again, lots of cool things coming out, lots of new features that we generally post on the channel here first before we even talk about them anywhere else, and certainly before they get released. So this is the place to go for the freshest uh, information about Cortex. Um, so yeah, please subscribe. That's we're going to keep using this as our primary way of showing all that information. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Cortex users group on Tuesday, but also in the next video. Thanks for watching.